This free step-by-step video comes to you directly from Haynes, creators of the world's best repair manuals. Fix your car or truck the right way with our accurate and reliable information at your side. You can complete more than 200 jobs on this vehicle when you purchase the complete online manual at Haynes.com.
Fuel pump replacement. Remove the gas cap to relieve any built-up vapor pressure in the fuel tank. Remove the fuel pump control module, Fpcm, fuse from the trunk fuse block. Turn the ignition key to start and crank over the engine for several seconds. It will either start momentarily, then stall, or it won't start at all. Open the trunk and remove the floor mat. Then unscrew the large nut and remove the trunk floor panel. Remove the spare tire or air compressor as applicable. Loosen the cable bolt from the negative battery terminal, then disconnect the negative battery cable. Position the cable aside to prevent accidental reconnection. Apply the parking brake. Chock the rear wheels to prevent the vehicle from rolling. Raise the front of the vehicle by jacking under the front crossmember and supporting it on jack stands. Loosen the lamps securing the exhaust pipes to the catalytic converters. On models so equipped, detach the vacuum lines from the tailpipe flow control valves. Support the rear of the exhaust system with a jack. Detach the rear exhaust system hangers from the mufflers and exhaust pipes. Unbolt the small crossmember from the floor pan. Pull the exhaust system to the rear to disconnect it from the catalytic converters, then lower and remove it. Mark the relationship of the drive shaft coupler to the rear differential yoke. Wrap a chain wrench around the differential yoke, then unscrew the drive shaft coupler to yoke bolts. On models so equipped, remove the nuts securing the differential cooler lines. Remove the forward heat shield to expose the drive shaft. Mark the relationship of the drive shaft coupler to the transmission output shaft yoke. Unscrew and remove the coupler to transmission yoke nuts and bolts. Unscrew the center support bearing bolts, then remove the drive shaft. Remove the rear heat shield. On models so equipped, use a quick connect fitting tool and detach the differential cooler line fittings. Then remove the cooler lines. Detach the front parking brake cable from the parking brake equalizer. Then free the parking brake cables from the bracket on the chassis. Use a quick connect fitting tool and detach the fuel line fitting near the front of the fuel tank. Detach the other end of the fuel line from its fitting and remove it. Detach the fuel and EVAP lines near the right front corner of the fuel tank. Disconnect the fuel pump module electrical connectors. Loosen the clamp and detach the filler tube from the fuel tank. If there's much fuel in the tank, work through the filler tube fitting on the tank and use a siphoning pump to drain the fuel into an approved fuel container. Detach the fuel filler vent hose from its fitting at the chassis-mounted pipe. Disconnect the EVAP lines and electrical connector from the EVAP canister. Support the differential with a jack, then remove the subframe front mounting bolts. Reinstall the bolts temporarily, threading them in about 4 turns. Loosen the subframe rear mounting bolts a few turns. Lower the jack until the subframe rests on the bolt heads. Keep the jack in this position. Support the fuel tank with a jack, then remove the fuel tank strap bolts. Remove the subframe front mounting bolts and lower the jack supporting the differential a couple of inches. Slowly lower the jack, moving the front of the fuel tank down and forward while sliding the rear of the tank out from between the subframe and chassis. Disconnect the electrical connector from the fuel pump module. Then disconnect the fuel line fitting from the module. Using a pair of large adjustable pliers, loosen the fuel pump module lock ring, then remove it. Pull the fuel pump module up and disconnect the transfuser tube fitting. Then pour the remaining fuel from the module into the tank. Remove the sealing O-ring and wipe the fuel tank sealing surface clean. Install the O-ring. It can be reused if it isn't damaged. Connect the transfer tube to the fitting on the fuel pump module. Then angle the module into the tank, being careful not to bend the sending unit arm. Align the tab on the module with the forward-facing cutout on the tank. Install the lock ring and tighten it with a large pair of pliers. Reconnect the electrical connector and the fuel line to the fuel pump module. Place the tank on the jack and guide it into position. Install the fuel tank strap bolts, tightening them to the specified torque setting. Reconnect the EVAP lines and electrical connector to the EVAP canister. Reconnect the fuel filler hose to the fuel tank and tighten the clamp securely. Raise the differential and subframe into position. Install the subframe front mounting bolts, then tighten the front and rear bolts to the specified torque setting. Place the parking brake cables into the bracket on the chassis. Then reconnect the front parking brake cable to the equalizer. Reinstall the fuel feed line. Connect the fuel and EVAP lines at the right side of the tank. Also plug in the electrical connectors. Install the rear heat shield onto the fuel tank studs. Raise the drive shaft into position, aligning the previously applied match marks, then install the center support bearing bolts. Tighten the center support bearing bolts and the front and rear drive shaft coupler bolts and nuts to the specified torque settings. On models so equipped, reinstall the differential cooler lines, then reconnect the fittings at each end. Install the forward heat shield. Guide the exhaust system into place. Reconnect the exhaust system hangers. Install the small cross member and tighten the bolts securely. Tighten the exhaust pipe to catalytic converter clamp bolts securely. On models so equipped, connect the vacuum lines to the tailpipe flow control valves. Lower the vehicle to the ground unblock the wheels. Install the fuel pump control module, Fpcm, then install the cover on the fuse box. Install the gas cap and reconnect the negative battery cable. Attach the negative cable to the battery and tighten the bolts securely. Set the air compressor or spare tire into place. Install the floor panel and tighten the nut securely, then lay the floor mat in place. Turn the ignition switch to the on position and wait a few seconds to allow the fuel system to pressurize. Then start the engine and check for fuel leaks.